everyone, and welcome to Daily Newspaper Analysis, which is presented to you by LawSikho. So today we will discuss three articles. The first article is from the Hindu newspaper, which is titled as A Bullet Train to Hunger. So this again talks about the much discussed topic, which is of hunger and poverty, which have come as an uncalled for situation and uncalled for consequence along with the COVID pandemic. So what is the current situation and scenario we will discuss through this article. The second one is again from the Hindu, which is titled as EdTech Needs an Ethics Policy. So this basically talks about the various platforms and applications which are used as the means of technology for educational services and how there should also be a complete framework of ethics and ethical treatment of the consumers. And thirdly, this article is from the Indian Express, which is titled as Inaction is Expensive. So this talks about the problem of under quality drugs and even the fake drugs which are being sold in the country recently, keeping in mind the entire pandemic of COVID-19. So what can be the bad consequences or what can be the dire consequences of such actions if at all they are not curbed in the very first place have been discussed in this article. And finally, we have the Newsflash column. So this analysis is presented to you by me. My name is Sheva Khan, and I had completed my law degree from Uttaranchal University in the year 2019 with a gold medal in my batch. I have been a national debater and a public speaker throughout my educational career. At LawSikho, I work here as the current affairs expert as well as manager for free content and outreach. If you wish to reach out to me, you can always join me on my Twitter as well as LinkedIn handles. Both of these links are available in the description box. On this note, let's see what is the multiple choice question from yesterday's discussion. So your question is, who was the founder of modern nursing? Your options are Florence Nightingale, Samuel Hahnemann, Rudolf Karl Virchow, or Mother Teresa. If you know the answer, you can put it down in the comment section below. Let's see what is the descriptive question for the day. How COVID-19 lockdown worsened hunger in India, the world's largest food basket. Discuss. Let's get started with the discussion of the first article of the day, which talks about the importance of social security nets. So it says that the poor have suffered avoidable miseries due to the unilateral national lockdown in 2020, having to deal with hunger and uncertainty about livelihoods. Now, the reason why the author chooses to use the term avoidable miseries is that these things which the poor people, the migrants, had to face due to the lockdown of 2020, all these things could be tackled with, or all these things could be avoided if the right actions were taken in the right time. But because they were not, and they were actually the authority, this government, the state was basically complacent regarding the plight or regarding the problems of these hunger-stricken people, it became actually a situation wherein they had to suffer the most in the pandemic. So if at all we talk about the divide which exists between the rural and the urban areas of the country, so let's consider this report called as the State of Working India Report 2021, which is brought by the Azim Premji University, according to which half of the formal salaried workers moved into informal workers between the late 2019 and late 2020. Also, the poorest 20% of the households lost their entire household's incomes in April and May 2020, and 23 crore individuals were pushed below the minimal earnings of rupees 375 per day, according to the Anup Satpathy Committee. Now here, this name of the committee, which is the Anup Satpathy Committee, should be kept in mind as to what does it deal with. So it deals with the basic or the minimum income per person per month. So as we can see that according to the State of Working India report of 2021, the situation specifically with the poor people has been worsened. And the poverty rates in the rural areas increased by 15% points. That is why we need to understand and focus that it was not that the impact of pandemic has been equivalent or it has been equal in all the people of the society, because many reports have also highlighted that the rich in our country tend to become richer in such pandemics, and this was exactly the case what happened in India as well. So the few richest of the persons and richest of the families of the country, they became even richer in this time, and the poor became even poorer. So let's understand that what are the important laws or what are the important social security nets that are available, which could have been used more efficiently to curb down the situation. First is the National Food Security Act of 2013. So 75% of the rural population and 50% of the urban population are entitled to 5 kg of subsidized food grains each month. So, though the National Food Security Act definitely provides some amount of security, as in terms of food, at least to the families that are poor, but still we need to see and understand as to how much can we believe to the fact that this 5 kg of subsidized food grains is actually the one that is reaching these people in the first place. And secondly, what we need to understand is it really sufficient that this 5 kg of subsidized food grains would be able to feed the entire family of that poor person? So that is something that we need to analyze critically. And the second provision or the security net that we have with us is the Manrega. Now, as we know, the Manrega is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. So basically, this act is the one which, as the name itself is suggesting, it promises or it guarantees an employment of at least 100 days in a whole year. So when the lockdown period was started back in the previous year in March 2020, so it was seen that a lot of people had to move back to their original or native villages. In such a scenario, obviously the burden and the responsibility on the Manrega to provide employment to these people who were rushing back to their hometowns definitely increased. Though it was seen that it tried to outperform as well as it tried to perform very well in that time, but still it was not able to definitely cater all the needs of the workers. And thus, there was a 47% increase in person days of work in 2020 to 21 as compared to 19 and 20. But still, again, if we try to analyze it critically, was it even enough to accomplish or to bring in or to bring under its ambit all the workers that were seeking employment? Definitely not. And a record of 72 lakh households completed 100 days of work in a year. But definitely, yes, it was definitely a ray of hope in that dark situation. So we can say that the National Food Security Act and Manrega were the two rays of hopes in the dark doom of the pandemic COVID-19 that had caused on the poor households. Now, the article also talks about some steps that are needed in this direction. The first one is to expand the National Food Security Act coverage for at least 1 year. Now, as we were just discussing, that how much is this act really has been able to help the poor in the real sense. So for that, it is at least it is expected that this entire NFSA, which is National Food Security Act coverage, should be given for at least 1 year. And secondly, we should increase the Manrega entitlements to 200 days per household. So as I just mentioned, that it is currently for 100 days per year. So it should be at least made to 200 days per household. With this, let's discuss about the second article of the day, which talks about the ethics policy for EdTech. Now, before beginning with this article, let's understand as to what do we mean by the EdTech. Now, this EdTech term has been brought up by amalgamating two words. The first is education, and the second is technology. So, whatever technology, software, apps, or any kind of platform that is used for dissipating the education is called as EdTech. For example, even the Microsoft Meets or even the Google Meets, the Zoom Meets, etc. These are all these days used for dispensing the classes, or these are all used for dispensing the educational things. And that is why these are also educational technologies. Also, there are various other apps that could be used by students to log in and other stuff and other study material which would be available to them. So all these platforms are considered to be as the edtechs. Now, the question that has been risen in this particular article is that when we talk about the privacy of the data, the importance of keeping the data safe of the people, and also when we talk about having the personal data protection bill in the country, why at all should we be taking out or not include the edtechs from this? And definitely these days, specifically when the schools, colleges, and all educational institutions have significantly shut down and all the education is being dissipated or is carried out through the educational platforms and technology stuff. So it is very much important that we also consider that what are the ethical issues or ethical issues in terms of policies attached with these edtechs. So the lack of regulatory framework in India, which should be in lines with the general data protection regulation in Europe, could impinge privacy of students who use the edtech. In our previous newspaper analysis discussions as well, we had drawn a complete analysis and a point of differentiation between the Indian system or the regulatory framework that is currently available for the protection of personal data as compared to the European General Data Protection Regulation. And if you remember, we had discussed about a very important right that the people in Europe enjoy, that was the right to be forgotten, which meant that if I, as a personal user, or I, as a consumer, had my details into any software or had my details onto any internet or network site, then I could request directly to that particular site or software or application to completely delete or erase my data. And that would be called that I am exercising my right to be forgotten. But definitely that does not exist in the case of India. Like this, there are various other rights also that the people in Europe enjoy with regard to the protection of their data, which definitely are not available to the Indian consumers. So if we talk about the edtechs collecting the information, so the data are collected from the learners to perform the process of learning customization. Now, as you must have also seen that when you try to log in or try to download any kind of particular study material, so many a times that particular website asks you for your name, your phone number, or even your profession, your mail ID, etc. So there are various platforms that actually ask for a lot of information for logging in as well. So the apps and devices have the access to the private spaces of the learner, such as emotions, attitudes, etc. You must have also noticed that when at any one particular platform at the internet, we make a kind of search, let's say it be of anything. So that internet service uses the property of artificial intelligence. And you must have noticed that even when you log in into some other platform, it shows us the similar objects or the similar suggestions. I have been noticing this several times. Like, for example, I search for a pair of shoes on one particular site, let's say Mintra. So whenever I open Facebook or any other website for that matter, in the side area where they show advertisements or suggestions, it shows me exactly the same shoes which I had been searching. So this is the use of artificial intelligence, or many times may I say that it might be a misuse of artificial intelligence, wherein they try to take over our emotions and attitudes in the internet usage. So if at all we talk about the ethical policy, so the researchers dealing with human subjects needs to comply with the ethics rules as per the global standards. Now, one question might be coming up in your mind, that what do we mean by bringing in the ethics with regard to the protection of data? See, whenever we talk about ethics, we all are humans, and that is why we are expected to behave in a certain manner. That is why when we say or call ourselves social animals, we need to behave in a social manner. And we cannot be reckless towards the other human beings or other elements of the environment as well. That is why, in such regard, it is expected that after being human, we conduct ourselves or we have ourselves bound by some ethical rules. And that is why, even if it comes to the data protection, so the humans, we should be very much careful that we're abiding by to the basic ethics of the human society. That is, we're not misusing the personal data or personal details of any individual for our own benefit. And thus, there is one important rule on the global front as well, which is about the informed consent. Now, it says that the researchers working with children should consult with the school teachers, parents, etc. about the nature of data that they are collecting, storing, and also the potential harmful effects that this data collection might have. And that is why this consent which the students or children are giving should be an informed consent. Now, by informed consent, for example, if somebody gives you a poison to drink, now that person does not even tell you that this is a poison and just say that this is a normal drink and you can have it, and you give your consent to drink it, do you think that you have exercised an informed consent? Obviously not, because you did not even know the real nature of what you were drinking. But if that person tells you in the first place itself that, see, this can be harmful for your health and only you have to decide if you want to or not drink this particular thing. Now, when you know the entire consequences of what you are drinking, that would be called an informed consent. Now, whether you say yes or no to it, it depends totally on you. But definitely, everybody has a right to be informed about that particular decision. Let's see what are the minimal safeguards which are currently available. So since India does not have a protection equivalent to the GDPR, which was the General Data Protection Regulation of Europe, the private data collected by the edtech company can be misused or sold to the other companies with no oversight or protection. And as we have several times discussed as well, that in India, currently also the data protection bill, the personal data protection bill is still a bill as it was proposed by Justice B.N. Sri Krishna committee, but still it has not been formulated or has not taken a concrete shape. So the children, they use apps without the parent or adult supervision, which ultimately puts them at the stake of being misused. So also this article suggests some steps that can be taken in this direction. Firstly, to formulate an ethics policy for edtech companies through active participation of educators, researchers, parents, learners, and industry experts. So definitely we can have an all-encompassing and bringing in all the stakeholders together, we can have this ethics policy driven and drawn for the entire edtech companies. And secondly, the issue of fairness, safety, confidentiality, and anonymity would have to be dealt with. Now, definitely, how much information has to be kept confidential? What information can be kept anonymous? How can we deal with the fairness and safety of the information that we have needs to be dealt with. Thus, if we understand the 6 GDPR principles to ensure the accountability, they are firstly, the lawfulness, second, the purpose limitations, thirdly, data minimization, fourthly, data accuracy, fifthly, storage limitations, and sixthly, the integrity. Now let's discuss the third and the last article for the day, which talks about the hoarding and black marketing, especially of the drugs in the given situation. So the courts in India have passed orders against hoarders and black marketeers. And across the country, there have been arrests for diversion, hoarding, and black marketing. So before moving deeper into this article, let's first understand the basic meaning of these terms. So by a hoarder, we mean anyone who stocks up items. So under the law, there are certain limits in stocking. Now, this is I will try to give you this as a very simple example. Let's say when we have any particular commodity, let's say onions in the market, though this particular article talks more about the drugs, but I'll just try to give it to you with a very simple example. So what happens is that, for example, onions are being procured in the market currently. Now, there are people who, instead of bringing in these onions directly for retail in the market, they choose to hoard it, which means they choose to hide it or stock it up in their cold stores. Now, in such a situation, what would happen is that due to the lack of the availability of the onions in the market, so what would happen is that the prices would rise. Now, definitely, there is more demand but less supply, and thus inflation would occur, and so the prices of the onions would rise. Now, when the prices have risen in the market, now these hoarders will come to the upfront and slowly they will unfold the whole onion stock that they have. And instead of, that onion that could have been sold at, let's say, 25 or 30 or 40 rupees per kg, now because of this inflation, it is sold at 80 or even 100 rupees per kg. That is why the hoarding is not allowed under the government norms, and only some limited amount or stocking limits are prescribed for every particular commodity. And the second term which we will be dealing in this in this article is the black market. So black market is charging a premium during a shortage. Now, definitely, as we know, every one of us knows that when we have heard this thing of selling some tickets in black, that simply means that something that is not directly or easily available in the market, but because you, being some kind of a black marketeer, you have an access to that particular thing, you choose to sell it to somebody at unprecedentedly high prices. Exactly the case that is happening in the current situation with the oxygen cylinders, various drugs that are needed for COVID treatment as well. So if we talk about the problem of fake and substandard drugs in specific, so the reports of fake remdesivir and azithromycin being produced in Kotdwar in Uttarakhand and are being sold in Delhi. So as we know that these two drugs are one of the most important drugs for the COVID treatment, there have been reports that they are produced, the fake versions of these are produced in Uttarakhand and are being sold in Delhi. So as per the ASSOCHAM, which is the Association for Chambers or basically the Associated Chambers of Commerce and Industry of India. So that actually had brought up a report in 2018, according to which about 1/3 of the drugs sold in India are fake. Now, can you understand the depth of the problem which would be there from fake drugs? Now, let's say anything in this market could be fake. Maybe it could be the pulses, even, that is also to be consumed. So that definitely has a very detrimental effect. But let's say there are some cosmetics that are sold which are fake, some clothes, some any kinds of, anything wearable, anything of that sort. The electrical appliances could be fake, but still they do not really have the tendency to hamper the life of an individual. But just let's consider that some drugs which a person is consuming to treat his disease, even that drug is not fake, which means that the components, the salts of that drugs are not real. So definitely it would not be able to cure that particular patient. So can you understand that there are many people who even go for loans and they cannot even afford treatments, but yet they take debts to take treatments. And still, if you think, if at all they're consuming fake drugs, it is really, really bizarre and totally unethical on this ground. So if we talk about the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, it has different categories of misbranded, adulterated, and spurious drugs. So it says that the level of enforcement in many states has been far from satisfactory. The problem were preliminary due to inadequate or weak drug control infrastructure, according to the Mashelkar Committee 2003. So please keep the name of this Mashelkar Committee in mind as well, which is regarding the fake drugs or the misbranded or adulterated or spurious drugs. So there have also been some reforms recently in the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. So the 2008 amendment provided for more stringent penalties to those involved in the trade of spurious drugs. And some offenses have become non-bailable as well. There are specially designated courts and regulatory infrastructure that have been assigned for this particular strengthening of system. And there is now a whistleblower scheme. Now, a whistleblower scheme specifically means that if at all there is something within the system going wrong, so there are whistleblowers who alarm the government or the related or the concerned authorities about such any discrepancy. On this note, let's see what do we have for news and flash today. First is the happy hypoxia. So most of the young generation patients do not even realize that their oxygen level is going low and they continue their normal activities without any intervention. So suddenly the oxygen level drops down and the patient becomes unstable. This condition is known as happy hypoxia. So basically it means that when even after a dip in the oxygen in the body or the person does not realize that the oxygen has dipped, that condition is known as happy hypoxia. Second, Homen Borgahain passes away. So he was a renowned Assamese literature and a Sahitya Academy Award recipient. He had written around 11 novels in Assamese. So previously, he has worked as the president of Assam State's apex literary body, Assam Sahitya Sabha, and has served as the editor-in-chief for two major Assamese dailies, the Amar Asom and the Neomiya Barta. Also, he was also the writer of the famous book Pita Putra. With this, we are done for the day. We hope it was a good session for you all. Thank you so much for staying tuned with Law Seekho. Please subscribe to our channels for such more updates to come daily.